Visible na po ba 'to?
Oo, li lumabas na dito at saka yung sound.
Okay po. So, good day everyone. I will be discussing the prevalence, dynamics, and consequences of sexual assault in the Philippines. This topic is not only a matter of law and public health, but also a human rights concern. Our goal today is to understand how common sexual assault is, how it happens, and what lasting effects it brings to individuals in our society. So, sexual assault is not limited to rape alone. It includes molestation, harassment, exploitation, and even online abuse. It is a major concern in the Philippines because it affects people across all ages, genders, and backgrounds. For this presentation, we will look into three things first. First, its prevalence or how common it is. Second, its dynamics or how and why it occurs. And finally, consequences and the consequences it leaves behind. So how do we define sexual abuse? Sexual assault. In the Philippines, sexual assault is defined by the laws such as the Anti-Rape Law of 1997 or the RA 8353, the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act, the RA 926, or known as the VAUSI, and other provisions under the Revised Penal Code. And importantly, our laws recognize that rape can be committed against both women and men. With the rise of technology, online sexual abuse and exploitation of children, or OSEG, also become a serious crime with specific legislation addressing it. Moving on, talking about prevalence, the intimate partner and general violence. According to the 2017 National Demographic and Health Survey, about 24% of women with a partner reported experiencing some form of violence. Specifically, around 10% suffered physical violence, 3% experienced sexual violence, and 19% emotional violence. More recent data from the Philippine Commission on Women also indicates that nearly one in every five women aged 50 to 49 have experienced violence from their partner. Knowing this, there are also prevalence of sexual assault in children and online exploitation. One of the alarming concerns in the Philippines is child sexual abuse, especially online exploitation. In 2019, there were about 426,000 reports of online child sexual abuse. By 2023, that number skyrocketed to 2.7 million reported incidents. The Child Protection Network also reported that from 2022 to 2023, more than 73% of child abuse cases in the country were sexual in nature. Clearly, children are among the most vulnerable groups. Among this, there's also prevalence in the reported rape cases and other crimes. So, the Philippine National Police records thousands of rape cases every year. For instance, around 9,400 rape cases were reported in a recent year, between July 2021 and January 2022. Cases range from over 5,000 to nearly 4,000. But we must remember these numbers reflect only the reported cases. Because of such stigma and fear, many victims do not come forward, which means that true prevalence is much higher. This means that there are still numerous unreported cases out there. So moving on, the dynamics. Contrary to the myth of the stranger danger, most sexual assaults are committed by people the victim knows. In the Philippines, perpetrators are often intimate partners, relatives, or trusted adults. This means ito po yung mga jowa or asawa or kahit yung mga kamag-anak po natin. In cases involving children, it is not unusual for abusers to be parents, relatives, or even godparents. This closeness po kasi creates a silence and fear in victims, making it harder for them to speak out. Kumbaga dito po lalo na po sa children cases po, hindi po sila nagre-report kasi nanay mo naman yan, tatay mo naman yan, bakit mo i-report? In that in that case, it creates a stigma and silence between them po. Moving on, we have underreporting and barriers to reporting. One of the biggest challenges that I have mentioned is underreporting. Victims often keep silent due to shame, fear of retaliation, or the belief that authorities won't help them. In rural areas, limited access to support services and trained law enforcers make the problem even worse. As a result, many cases go unpunished and victims remain unprotected. This is sadly the case in Philippines where often Uh, the victims do not report because, of course, of the stigma and the fear that they will not be believed in. Of course, there are consequences in such actions. Sexual assault has immediate effects on the victim's health. Many suffer injuries such as bruises, lacerations, and internal trauma. Victims are also at higher risk of contracting sexually transmitted infections and experiencing unwanted pregnancies. These consequences require urgent medical attention, which not all survivors are able to access. Due to Philippines not having enough funding, sometimes the immediate physical consequences that they experience are not addressed at immediately, which can cause further injuries and other things that they may have contract to be worsened over time. Also, we have the psychological and emotional consequences. The emotional impact is just as severe. Victims often struggle with depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Some even develop suicidal thoughts. Among women in the NDHS survey, emotional abuse was the most common form of violence reported. For children, sexual abuse can lead to lasting trauma, mistrust, and low self-esteem. Other than the physical abuse, the victims experience psychological and emotional consequences, and they are not easily as addressed in the public or given proper treatment for it. Of course, there's also social and economic consequences. Beyond individual suffering, sexual assault affects communities and the economy. Victims may drop out of school or lose their jobs. Families may face medical bills, legal expenses, and emotional strain. Dito na po na parang these are the effects of the psychological and the physical um consequences they receive. Eventually it will affect their social and economic consequences, because some of them might fear going out, and that fear may not lead them to be fully integrated into community or have a proper job or even not be able to go to school. Of course, the existence of social stigma and victim blaming also isolates survivors, making their recovery even more difficult. In the long run, this affects not only the victims but also the development of our society. Of course, we have to have a response. The legal and institutional response is that the Philippines has passed strong laws to combat sexual violence. The RA 8353 against rape, RA 9262 against violence towards women and children, and laws against online child exploitation. Institutions like the PNP Women and Children Protection Center and the Barangay Vow desks provide assistance. The Rape Crisis Center Act requires hospitals to provide services for survivors. Still, of course, despite having all this, enforcement and accessibility remain uneven. Though we have all these things that the Philippines has passed and the things that the government have made, like the PNP Women Health Desk, it is still not yet accessible. And sometimes there is still a stigma between going to there and reporting. Of course, there are still different strategies, challenges, and the gaps that we encounter. Despite these laws, there are still gaps, of course. Many victims do not report, or when they do, the cases take years to resolve. Some areas lack forensic kits and trained personnel. Mental health support is limited, and societal attitudes still tend to blame the victim rather than the perpetrator. Until these gaps are addressed, justice will remain out of reach for many survivors. And some strategies we have to prevent this is that to prevent the actual sexual assault to happen is we need a multi-level approach. First, we need to educate the public about consent and respect. Second, the economic empowerment to reduce the vulnerability caused by poverty. Third, stronger child protection measures, especially against online abuse. Fourth, accessible reporting channels and trauma-informed support. Finally, of course, you have the proper training for law enforcement and healthcare workers to handle cases with sensitivity. So, to conclude all these, in summary, sexual assault in the Philippines is widespread, affecting women, children, and even men. It is committed by someone close to the victim, hidden by silence, and worsened by the stigma. The consequences, physical, psychological, social, and economic, are long lasting. If we want change, we need stronger laws, better services, awareness, and a shift in our culture from one that silences victims to one that supports and protects them. That is all po. Thank you.
Tapos na, Miss Katapang.
Yes po, Doc.